The first battle of the Civil War was the Battle of Fort Sumter, off the coast of South Carolina in early April 1861. A week later, something like a battle erupted in the streets of Baltimore during the Pratt Street Riots, when Union soldiers faced off with a gang of Southern sympathizers during their march through the city. 4 Union soldiers and 12 citizens were killed in the shooting. The next clash was a gory 3-man skirmish in a staircase in a Virginian hotel, the Marshall Inn, 1 month later in May. One of the combatants was a close personal friend of Abraham Lincoln, Colonel Elmer Ellsworth, who believed he was doing the president a personal favor by removing a Confederate flag from the top of the building. He was killed by a double-barreled shotgun blast to the center of his chest at a distance of a few inches. He died almost instantly. The man wielding the shotgun, the owner of the Marshall Inn, the secessionist James W. Jackson, was himself then shot in the face at equally close range before being bayoneted repeatedly in the smoky aftermath of the first 2 shots, with such force that his body was propelled to the bottom of a flight of stairs. The lone survivor, Private Francis Brownell, had ducked a shot from Jackson before killing him and knocking him to the landing below. If historians were to formally name this high-casualty encounter, where 2/3 of all participants died, they might call it the Battle of Marshall's Landing, or the slaughter at the staircase. As it is, it's a footnote in history, forgotten by all but the buffest of Civil War buffs. Of course, to qualify as a true battle, you need more than just 3 combatants, but there's a real sense in which this event is symbolic of the war itself. The South won early, the North won late, and at great cost, due largely to its superior manpower and industry. Even the lowering of the Confederate flag represents the ultimate conclusion of the war, the surrender of Richmond, and the removal of that banner from all government buildings. 2 months after the slaughter at the staircase, the Battle of Bull Run would claim the lives of more than 1,000 Americans. And over the next 4 years, 1 million more would die before the fighting ended. But in May of 1861, the only official casualty in the war had been the accidental death of a Union soldier standing too close to a cannon that fired prematurely during a 100-gun salute. Following the surrender of Fort Sumter to Confederate forces. The Battle of Fort Sumter itself had been bloodless. As high as tensions were, American-on-American killing in the War of Secession was still more of an impossible nightmare than a real-world concern. Most Americans still expected a short and relatively harmless war. Remember when the first Battle of Bull Run began, 2 months later in July? Throngs of spectators gathered around the edge of the battlefield, almost as if it were a sporting arena. Many of those in attendance actually brought picnic baskets to watch the drama unfold. Dozens of members of Congress attended, and of course, food vendors were there to make a buck off those who hadn't brought enough to eat or drink. Any official violence in the name of the Union, or in the name of secession, was a jarring reversal of popular expectations. So when Jackson killed Ellsworth and Brownell killed Jackson in an anonymous staircase in Alexandria, the nation took notice. Ellsworth was a Union officer who had worked for Abraham Lincoln in Springfield before following him to Washington. When Lincoln put out a call for volunteer troops following the surrender of Fort Sumter, Ellsworth did him one better. He formed an entire regiment of 1,100 soldiers, called the First Fire Zouaves, or the Ellsworth Zouaves, and known formally as the 11th New York Volunteer Infantry. With their flashy, French-inspired uniforms and elaborate drilling exhibitions, the Zouaves became a national sensation, and Ellsworth was soon a minor celebrity, having gathered and drilled his regiment, largely consisting of volunteer firemen, into shape. He brought them to Washington to meet his old friend Lincoln. But on his way into town, the colonel spotted a Confederate flag atop the Marshall Inn in nearby Alexandria. When he learned this flag was visible with field glasses from nearby Washington, D.C., and that Lincoln and his cabinet had been tracking it from a distance, he insisted on taking it down. So, Ellsworth crossed back over the Potomac into Virginia with 7 of his men to take matters into his own hands. It was like a miniature 7-man invasion with a very specific, very small objective. What Ellsworth did not know is that the owner of the inn had already declared the flag would be removed only over his dead body. As it happens, a news correspondent happened to be staying at the hotel and gave an eyewitness account of the scene as it unfolded. This appeared in the June 8, 1861 issue of Harper's Weekly, an American political magazine based in New York City.
No, for every vale and hill, one response all hearts shall thrill. Ellsworth's fame is with us still, ne'er to pass away. Bring that rebel banner low, hoisted by a treacherous foe. 'Twas for that they dealt the blow, laid him in the dust. Raise aloft that all may see his loved flag of liberty. Forward then to victory, or perish if we must. Hark to what Columbia saith, mourn not for his early death. With each patriot's dying breath, strength renewed is given. To the cause of truth and right, to the land for which they fight. After darkness cometh light, such the law of heaven. So we name him not in vain, though he comes not back again. For his country he was slain, Ellsworth's blood shall rise. To our gracious Savior King, 'tis a holy gift we bring. Such a sacred offering, God will not despise.
Of course, Abraham Lincoln was deeply wounded by the death of his friend and called him, quote, the greatest little man I ever met. Ellsworth was 5'6", Lincoln 6'4". I'll leave you with a brief selection from another popular tribute to Lincoln's little friend called Brave Men, Behold Your Fallen Chief. The audio quality isn't great and the singing is not professional. It's more the style you'd have heard in northern pubs and inns in the weeks leading up to the first battle of Bull Run.